Goeiedag, mijn naam is Evan, ik ben migratieprocureur hier in Amerika en ik wil je helpen om immigratiewet te verstaan. Now, there's a question that keeps on coming up on many of the Facebook groups that I'm in and here on the YouTube channel as well. And I need to address it today, and I've addressed it before because I genuinely need you to understand something. If you are trying to get into the refugee program or if you are here in the United States and you're seeking asylum, because this is very important. Remember that whether it's asylum or refugee programs, they use the same terminology, they use the same standards, and in a nutshell, and we've talked about this at length, and you can go see previous videos that I've posted, you have to prove, and the refugee program says articulate, but asylum seekers, you have to prove that you have either faced persecution in the past by the government or someone the government is unable or unwilling to control due to an immutable characteristic, in this case, your race. So you have been persecuted because you're an Afrikaner, or you have a well-founded fear of future persecution by the government or someone the government is unable or unwilling to control, again, because of this nexus, this connection to an immutable characteristic, in this case, again, being your race. Simply being a victim of crime or simply a country being a failed state and crime-ridden does not a refugee or an asylee make. And again, we've talked about this at length, but I just want to make sure we're clear. Now, I say that because I want to, again, talk about this concept of persecution. Persecution is defined as more than mere discrimination or harassment. It is an extreme level of conduct. So we're talking about threats to life and severe threats to liberty. It has to be extreme. And I've given you examples before of appeals that I've written to the Board of Immigration Appeals that have been denied, that have been dismissed because the immigration judge, then the Board of Immigration Appeals, did not think severe beatings and things like that amounted to persecution, to show you how high that bar is for persecution. I say that to say this. The comments that I keep saying, this one comment I was going to put up, but I can't find anymore, and maybe the person removed it, or they were embarrassed with the answers that they got. And I do want to say one thing before I even get into this. Remember that please be civil to each other. Many people are afraid. Many people have questions that continue to come up. I've gone through the same questions multiple times. That's okay. It's a very scary situation. So don't necessarily jump someone's case if they ask something that has been asked and answered multiple times. Just my opinion. But this question, again, I kept seeing and I saw, someone said, they even said, don't attack me for this. I just want to know, is it true if we become a refugee, we can never go back? Because I have family there. And I've talked about this. As a refugee, and even these asylum seekers, for many of you who watch this channel who are asylum seekers in the United States, the biggest problem that I have is this desire or the vocalization of I'm going to return or I want to return, or people who have gone back and forth to South Africa and the United States. Because returning to that country undermines any well-founded fear of future persecution. Because persecution is so severe, it's so extreme, you will have a very difficult time arguing to a refugee officer, and especially to an asylum officer. If you're an asylum seeker and you've gone back to South Africa, and then you come back here, your asylum is thrown out. In fact, if you've been here, didn't file for asylum, went back to South Africa, and then come back here and try and file for asylum, you will have a very difficult time winning asylum. So they're going to say, well, why'd you go back? You say you have this well-founded fear of future persecution. Persecution is so extreme and outrageous, no one would go back. So for my refugees, you have to understand that no, while you're a refugee, you cannot go back. If you did, or if that's even a consideration for you, even if the argument is, well, I have family there, I have elderly family there, I want to go back, I want to see them, or what if someone dies? I understand it. Human beings understand it. But that is not a refugee program. A refugee program is not an entitlement. A refugee program is to save you from persecution that is imminent, and persecution rises to that level more than mere discrimination, harassment. So if you even go to your refugee interview with the USCIS refugee officer and you ask that question, that could even undermine your claim because you're showing them you're considering being able to come back. No, persecution means you don't go back because you were that afraid of returning. Now, after a year in the United States of being a refugee, you will apply for your lawful permanent residency, which is a green card. And then once you have status other than a refugee, then it's possible you can return for a family emergency or something like that. But again, that's a different issue for a different time. While you're a refugee, no, you're not going back. And if that's too much for you, fine. But then wait, is it really persecution? Or can I go back to South Africa? And the reason that I say these comments have got to stop, you've got to stop making these comments. And again, feel free to do what you want, but it puts out this visual of people who are against this refugee program or even against giving Afrikaners asylum status for those who are here. It gives them ammunition to say, see, it's not that bad. They're going to go back for a funeral. They want to go back to visit family. They want to go back for holiday. That is not fear of persecution. And that fear of persecution has to be so high, that level is so high that returning is not even an option. Now, of course, we all know we're human beings. We have family or things like that. Once you get to that no longer refugee status, once you become a lawful permanent resident, and for asylum seekers, once you've been granted asylum and then you become a lawful permanent resident, going back becomes an option. But again, in an asylum proceeding, or while you're waiting to be a refugee, or if you come over here as a refugee, you're not going back while you're under refugee status. If that's even a consideration, then the government's going to look and say, well, do you really have a well-founded fear of future persecution if you're asking me if I can go back to South Africa for any reason? So hopefully that makes sense. And I'm trying desperately for y'all, and forgive my dogs, they're losing their mind over something right now. But I'm trying to get you to see that the things that you say, especially in an interview, like asking a USCIS refugee officer, can I come back to visit my family? Can I come back if there's an emergency? If you're willing to come back, then you do not have a well-founded fear of future persecution. And for all my Afrikaner friends who contacted me about, I'm leaving South Africa to come to the United States, then I'm going back to South Africa, then I want to come back and file for asylum, you will lose 100% of the time because you've undermined that well-founded fear of future persecution. So that one question of, can I go back as a refugee? I've said it many times, the answer is no. Not until you're no longer in refugee status. Can you go back if you're here as an asylee? No, not unless you want to throw out your asylum claim. Because this definition of the word persecution is the key. Persecution is an extreme level of conduct. So remember that, and hopefully this helps answer some questions. And of course, remember to put your other questions in the comment section. I'll try and get to them as I can. Remember to like, subscribe, share, and I'll see you for the next video.